Isn't it a great day to be a Christian? Amen. Open your Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Book of Ecclesiastes shows in a very powerful way that there's more to life than just existing. And Solomon came to that conclusion in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13, when he wrote, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." He said there's more to life than just living. But then he goes on, the next verse, he said, "For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil." So there's also more to life than just dying, because after that, there's the judgment. God's going to bring everything we do into judgment. Go to Ecclesiastes chapter 2 now. That's where we're going to be spending most of our time tonight. Last Sunday evening, we talked about Solomon starting his search for meaning in life. And he was looking for what is important, what's not important. And he observed the futility of life in that things just repeat over and over and over again. The sun comes up and the sun goes down. The wind blows this way and that way, and nothing ever changes. It's all the same. And he came to recognize the folly of human wisdom. It doesn't matter how much you know, we don't know enough. And there's still other things involved. He said that the repetition of life and human wisdom only bring about grief and folly, and that it's all vain. Tonight, we're going to look at chapter 2, and he starts looking for some other things and seeing if maybe they are what life's all about. Tonight, we'll talk about pleasure and wealth and great accomplishments and see if those are what life is all about. Now, we've already seen the end of the book, and we know that Solomon is looking in all the wrong places. We know that nothing that we're going to be looking at is the right answer. But Solomon went through this journey as he lived out his life. We're going to go through that journey with him and see if we can come to the same understanding that Solomon did. So let's look at Ecclesiastes 2 and begin in the first verse. And we're going to start talking about the vanity of pleasure. Ecclesiastes 2 verse 1 says, "I said in my heart, go now, I will prove thee with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure." Solomon says, I'm going to enjoy the good things in life. I'm going to do whatever brings me joy, whatever makes me happy. He's trying to distract himself from the repetition of life. He said the same thing happens over and over and over again. That's vanity, so I'm going to see if I can add something to that. I'm going to see if I can find something to bring me joy along the way. And so he embarks on a journey of acquiring pleasure. He was in search of the good life. What was the conclusion? Well, behold, this also is vanity. Verse 2 says, "I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doeth it?" What good does it do to laugh and be happy when that doesn't change anything? You're still going through the same old thing. Verse 3, he tried something different. He said, "I sought in my heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was that good for the sons of men, which they should do under the heaven all the days of their life." Now that's worded really strange, but it seems like he's saying, well, I'm a wise man, and I looked around and I saw these other people. They seem to be having a good time. So I thought, well, they're doing stupid stuff, but it brings them pleasure. Maybe if I drink enough wine, I'll find joy in doing stupid stuff too. Don't know, but he tried it, and we know that didn't work either. Solomon basically thought, maybe if I look at alcohol, it sounded kind of like the old beer commercials we used to see on television. You only go around once in life. You need to grab all the gusto you can get. And that's what Solomon seemed to be doing. I'm only going to do this once, so it's the same old thing over and over again. Maybe if I get drunk enough, I'll find joy. I'll find meaning in that. Well, we realize that revelry is not the answer either. Seeking pleasures, seeking to numb your mind through alcohol, none of those really bring about meaning. Life couldn't be found, or meaning couldn't be found by being the life of the party. Meaning in life couldn't be found through the bottom of a bottle. So Solomon went on. He decides he'll try building things and see if he can get some pleasure in that. Verse 4 said, "I made me great works. I builded me houses. I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards. I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruits. I made me pools of water to water therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees." Solomon was all about doing things to please Solomon. Notice he said, I made me great works. I builded me houses. I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens. I made me pools of water. Solomon says, I'm going to do something to make me happy. Solomon's all about pleasing Solomon. 1 Kings 7:1 says it took Solomon 13 years to build his house. Okay, he was really concentrating on doing a great job with that. And he wasn't finished. Verse 7 says, I got me servants and maidens and had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. To get some idea of the size of Solomon's flocks and herds, go very quickly to 1 Kings chapter 8. 1 Kings chapter 8. There's about to be a sacrifice made. And in verse 63, it says this. And Solomon offered a sacrifice of peace offerings, which he offered unto the Lord, 22,000 oxen, and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the children of Israel dedicated the house of the Lord. Okay? Think about it. Having that many oxen, that many sheep. And sheep and cattle were not the only things that Solomon owned. Go back to Ecclesiastes 2. Look at verse 8. He said, I gathered me also silver and gold and the peculiar treasures of kings and of the provinces. Now, like a lot of rich people of our day, the rich folks become patrons of the arts, and Solomon was no exception. The rest of that verse says, I got me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. He was rich, so he spent his money gathering things to entertain him. He gathered singers and instruments and people to play music. He thought that might bring him joy. Solomon was rich. Let's go back to 1 Kings again. Let's see how rich he was. Go to 1 Kings chapter 10. 1 Kings chapter 10 and start reading in verse 14. It says, Now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. Beside that, he had all of the merchantmen and of the traffic of the spice merchants and of all the kings of Arabia and of the governors of the country. And King Solomon made 200 targets of beaten gold. 600 shekels of gold went to one target. And he made 300 shields of beaten gold. 3 pounds of gold went into one shield. And the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. Moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with the best gold. The throne had 6 steps, and the top of the throne was round behind, and there were stays on either side of the place of the seat, and 2 lions stood beside the stays, and 12 lions stood there on one side and on the other upon the 6 steps. There was not the like made in any kingdom. And all King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, and all the vessels of his house of the forest in Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. It was nothing accounted of in the days of Solomon. Otherwise, as far as Solomon was concerned, silver didn't mean anything. That wasn't good enough. It was all about gold for Solomon. And just look at all the gold he had. Verse 14 said he received 666 talents of gold a year. I looked it up. That's about 24 tons. Okay, 24 tons of gold at last week's price would be worth a little over $1.78 billion. Okay, and that was per year he had coming in. Solomon was rich. And Solomon was using all his riches to please Solomon. He was looking for what would make him happy. Go back to Ecclesiastes chapter 2, and let's read in verse 9. It says, So I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Whatsoever my eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion of all my labor. Solomon had more than anybody before him ever had. He gave himself anything he wanted. He never said, I wish I had. If Solomon wanted it, he just got it. He had every desire fulfilled. He didn't have anything he was missing. What was the conclusion of that? Look at verse 11. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. Solomon examined carefully all that he had acquired, all that he had made, all that he had built, all that he had accumulated, all that he had tried to do for himself. and realized that it was all vain. It wasn't any good. How often do we chase after pleasure thinking that's what's going to make us happy? That's what's going to bring us joy. Modern society bombards us with advertisements trying to get us to go do this or do that, to bring us joy and to give us entertainment. Yet, like Solomon, we find when all is said and done, all these things are really empty. The pursuit of pleasure for pleasure's sake is vain. Let's go to Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6, Jesus is preaching the Sermon on the Mount. And here's what he says about accumulating stuff. Matthew 6, beginning down in verse 19. Jesus said, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." See, true fulfillment comes from God, and not from things, not from stuff, not from earthly pursuits. Solomon decided that all was vanity and vexation of the spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. That phrase, under the sun, appears 29 times in the book of Ecclesiastes. 29 times Solomon says there's nothing valuable under the sun, and he was right, because the true meaning of life can't be found under the sun, because that's here on earth, and that's not where joy really is. And that realization caused Solomon to hate life under the sun. First, he reflects on the vanity of his wisdom. Verse 12, "And I turned myself to behold wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do that cometh after the king? Even that which hath been already done. Then I saw that wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walketh in darkness. And I myself perceived also that one event happened to them all. Then said I in my heart, As it happeneth to the fool, so it happeneth even to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, that this also is vanity. For there is no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool forever. Seeing that which now is in the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man as the fool? Therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me. For all is vanity and vexation of spirit." Solomon contemplated wisdom and foolishness. And he said that wisdom is greater than foolishness. He said that wisdom far exceeded the madness of folly. It was great, just like light exceedeth darkness. Okay, he said being wise is better than being foolish, like having light is better than walking in the dark. Then he said, but wise people and fools are all going to die. You're all going to be dead. When you walk through the cemetery, there's no way of telling who was wise and who was foolish. They're all dead. None of them are here anymore. Solomon realized that there is no ultimate advantage in accumulating worldly wisdom, because you're still going to be dead when this life is over. So he hated life because he said it really didn't matter how wise he became, because he was still going to die. Education is valuable. Knowledge is valuable. But how you use that knowledge, how you use your education is what makes it valuable. And if you just use it to accumulate more stuff, Solomon says that it's vain. Apparently Solomon had forgot what he wrote in Proverbs 9 verse 10 when he said, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding." And he wasn't thinking about that. He'd forgotten where wisdom really came from. And as a result, it was vain. He said his wisdom was vain, and then he started looking at his labor. Go down to chapter 2, verse 18. Said, "Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. And who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet shall he have rule over all my labor wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. This is also vanity. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom, and in knowledge, and in equity. Yet to a man that hath not labored, therein shall he leave it for his portion. This also is vanity and a great evil. For what hath man of all his labor, and of the vexation of his heart, wherein he hath labored under the sun? For all his days are sorrows, and his travail grief. Yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This also is vanity." Solomon looked back at all he had accumulated, And then he realized, like all of us are going to one day understand, he couldn't take it with him. When he was dead, and he couldn't use those things anymore. He was going to leave it behind, and he said, what if I leave it to somebody that's a fool? I mean, I've accumulated all these things. What if I leave it to somebody that wastes it all, that gives it all away, that loses it all? And why would I want to work all this hard to accumulate all this stuff and then give it to somebody that didn't do anything to deserve it? Why should I pass this on to them? That's vanity. So Solomon looks back at his life and says, it's all vain. There's nothing worthwhile, but all wasn't lost. Remember back up in verse 9, he said that his wisdom remained with him. And that gets him to the final point. So finally, Solomon recognizes that the true meaning of life comes from the hand of God. Verse 24, there's nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw, that it was from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who else can hasten thereunto more than I? For God giveth to a man that is good in his sight, wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner he giveth travail, to gather, to heap up, that he may give to him that is good before God. This also is vanity and vexation of the spirit. For the first time, Solomon looks above the sun. He's not concentrating on under the sun. Solomon understood that it's good to enjoy the works of this life, but he needs to realize that they come from the hand of God. It didn't matter how hard Solomon worked, he wouldn't have those things if God hadn't been blessing him. We need to understand that God blesses us. We need to give him thanks for those blessings, but we need to also understand that just because we're blessed, that doesn't mean we're better than other people. Look at 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 5. Paul says this, perverse disputings of men of corrupt minds and destitute of the truth, supposing that gain is godliness, from such withdraw thyself. Paul said there's some people that think because they got a lot of money, that's because they were righteous. The rich people, they must have been really good because look how God blessed them. Paul says stay away from people that reason like that. Paul says stay away from people that act like they deserve all those things because they're so righteous. Then look at what he said in verse 6. But godliness with contentment is great gain. He said be godly, be satisfied, be happy with what God's blessed you with, and that will bring you joy. Enjoy your blessings, but make sure you're living a godly life. He goes on to say, for we brought nothing into this world, it's certain we can take nothing out. Having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many arrows. But thou, O man of God, flee these things. Follow after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, meekness. Solomon found himself pierced through with many arrows because he had placed his faith in his possessions rather than the source of all of his blessings. Solomon was interested in getting stuff instead of thanking God. Solomon finally, from a spiritual standpoint, saw that he needed to enjoy the works of his labor, but that all that came through God. God blesses the obedient with true wisdom and joy. At the end of chapter 2, for the first time, Solomon introduces God into the picture. He'd been looking at life under the sun, and under the sun, it was all vanity and fighting against the wind. When we acknowledge that life and wisdom and works are all gifts of God, when all that we have is because God is blessing us, then we can find joy in what we have, what we do. Meaning is not found in the pursuit of pleasure, wisdom, or work, but in a life surrendered to God. We'll look more next week in the weeks to come at the true meaning of life as we work through Ecclesiastes, but it's not found in worldly possessions. It's not found in worldly pleasures. It's only found in God. The true meaning of life is not found under the sun, S-U-N. It's found under the sun, S-O-N. To truly have meaning in your life, you need to be a Christian. It's the only life worth living, the only death one would dare to die. Jesus said in John 10:10, I've come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. If you're not enjoying that abundant life tonight, you can be. If you're subject to the Lord's invitation in any way, won't you come right now? We stand together as we sing.
Decided to follow Jesus.